Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Laura Marchant and I'm with the Career Development Center here at Suffolk University. And you have joined Create Your Career, Master Your Interviewing Skills. So thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate your time and your attention. This is an important subject matter. So there's several different types of interviewing, especially these days. There's a lot of virtual interviewing happening through either Zoom or Skype. There's also sometimes an initial telephone screening that happens. And then a face-to-face usually has been happening after that, either with human resources, hiring manager, recruiting staff, could be a group, a luncheon, a social activity. I'm not sure if these things are actively happening these days during COVID, but it is part of the interview process. So it's good to know what to expect once some of these guidelines are lifted and you are meeting face-to-face with employers. So we'll talk about both. We'll talk about how to prepare for both a virtual and a face-to-face interview. So the resume is what gets you the interview. And the interview is what leads to a job. It's extremely important before the interview to thoroughly research the company that you're interviewing at. Everything. Look at their website, look up them on Handshake, Glassdoor, LinkedIn. See if you're connected to anybody that's currently working there, or if there's any Suffolk alums that are currently working there, and have conversations with them, how they got their foot in the door, what they're doing. Newspaper, business, and trade publications, look to see if they've been in the news recently. And understand the competition. It's really important when you go on an interview and you look at the company website to look at other similar companies' websites so you can have intelligent conversation about the industry and industry trends. And it looks like you're well prepared when you do that. So it's all about preparation ahead of time. Dressing up for an interview face-to-face, of course, is critical, but it's also critical head to toe to dress up professionally for a virtual interview. I know you can only see, from the waist up or the neck up in a virtual interview, but if you're dressed from head to toe professionally, it gives you confidence. It makes you come across as a qualified candidate. You feel more proud of your qualifications. You feel more confident when you're answering questions and discussing what you bring to the table. And once in a while for face-to-face interviews, especially if it's second or third round interviews, they will tell you, no need to wear a suit today, dress casually. I'm inviting you to a luncheon with some of the other colleagues. And if this happens, then of course that's okay. Otherwise, a suit and a tie, button down for men, and some type of a suit for women as well. Little jewelry, no exposed tattoos, not a lot of perfume. You want to appear professional and ready. So making a first impression, of course, is critical because first impressions are, of course, lasting impressions. And there's a lot of non-verbals that happen both with a face-to-face and with a virtual interview. Of course, if it's face-to-face, a firm handshake is always very important. Again, that shows confidence. You don't want to squeeze their hand, of course, but you want to have a confident, firm handshake. Virtually, you want to have a confident smile. You want your posture to be upright. You want the sound of your voice to sound professional when you're delivering your answers and asking questions. Moderate volume, I would say, not too loud, not too soft. So practice that. These are things you can practice via Zoom meetings with friends or colleagues. And you always want to convey enthusiasm. Enthusiasm for the company, for the job you're applying to, for the industry that this job is a part of. And always be prepared for that little warm-up conversation, the breaking the ice. There's so much breaking of the ice these days through Zoom and through virtual meetings because it's so different. We're all learning this together. So that's a good starter. Oh, how's everything going? How are you dealing with these challenging times? You can talk about the weather a little bit. You can talk about sports a little bit, some type of icebreaker at the beginning, but take the cues from the interviewer to see how they're responding to that type of conversation. It's good because it creates a relaxed atmosphere when you start off with some type of easy conversation. And you want an interview to become a conversation. You want it to be a give and take. They are responding to what you're saying, and they have a new question because of something you've said. You're responding to what they're saying, and you're adding to that. You want it to be a give and take conversational situation, not a question, answer, because that's very dull, and that can be very boring. You want to show that you're an interesting person and that you have a lot to offer and put on the table. Again, it's a two-way communication. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. Keep that in mind. I tell candidates to keep that in mind all the time because it takes the edge off a little bit. It takes your nervousness off a little bit because they're trying to sell the job and the company to you. They think you're a good candidate. That's why they're interviewing you. That's why they chose you for this interview. So it's your chance to learn about the job and the company and the work culture and the managerial style. This is your chance to learn about them so you can make a good, educated decision of whether you accept the offer that's made. And communicate. Learn how to communicate. What distinguishes you from others? That's really key. So again, to prepare is critical for an interview. You want to anticipate questions. We'll go over some of the questions that are typically asked. You want to prepare examples of accomplishments and projects. So you want to have those stories in your mind ahead of time where you can show some of your accomplishments that are on your resume. You can talk about how that happened and the results and the outcomes. Have about 4 to 5 key selling points about yourself that are related to the job that you can bring into the conversation when you're answering the questions. And again, rehearse. Rehearse with a friend, rehearse in the mirror. Actually, rehearsing in the mirror is really interesting because it makes you nervous when you look in the mirror and you're answering questions. So it helps relax you. It helps you anticipate. It helps you know how to respond to questions. You can also conduct mock interviews with the Career Center. That is one of the appointments you can choose on Handshake is a mock interview. And I highly recommend you do that with 1 or 2 of the career advisors. And you can pick 1 or 2 different people because you'll see different interviewing styles that way. So it will help you prepare for the real thing. And it helps reduce nervousness. If it's a face-to-face interview, always arrive 10 minutes early. Not 15, not 20, not 30 minutes, right around 10 minutes early. What I suggest for face-to-face is you get to the location early and then maybe just sit outside or in the lobby or in a coffee shop and then go up to the office 10 minutes before the interview. Of course, for a virtual interview, you definitely don't want to be late for a virtual interview. There's no excuse for being late for a virtual interview. But you want to make sure that everything is working properly. Your video, your audio, you want to clear any distractions from your workplace. Make sure there's not a roommate home that's going to walk behind you during the interview. Make sure your cat is behind closed doors so he doesn't leap over you during the interview. So clear all distractions. You want to have a very clean, professional background. This helps remove distractions so that the interviewer is focused on you and you're able to focus on the interview. So there's some basic questions that typically always happen in an interview, especially a first interview, whether it's a phone screening or a virtual first meeting. They always want to know, tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Why do you have any job gaps, especially if you're an alum and you've been out in the workforce for a while? What do you know about the company? What do you know about the position? And where do you see yourself in the future? They may ask, where do you see yourself in 2 years? They may ask 5 years. They may ask 10 years. So be prepared to discuss all of these things, because more likely than not, you will be asked each of these questions. And when you're talking about yourself, tell me about yourself, you want to be memorable. You want them to remember you as a candidate. So again, this is where your brand comes in. This is where talking about your skills, your experiences, who you are as a person comes into play. What makes you unique? What sets you apart? You don't want to go in length with this question, tell me about yourself. You want to be concise and short and to the point, but you want to get a unique value across. Your skills and your qualities that you bring to the job. So that's where you need to really read that job description and understand what they are looking for in a candidate and how you relate to that, what you bring to the table. And that's when you tell me about yourself, what are your strengths and weaknesses. You want to talk about that job and what you bring to the table for strengths. And never focus on weaknesses. An interview always has to be very positive. You don't want to ever bring up past experiences that were negative. You don't want to talk about negative situations in group projects or past internships or weaknesses that you have as an individual. You do want to find one weakness, however, that you're already working on. And when you talk about that, you can say, I know, for example, my Excel skills aren't advanced, but I am taking some extra Excel courses right now so I can move from intermediate level to advanced. That's just one example. So you show a little weakness, but you show how you're improving that weakness. Again, avoid negative comments. Be aware constantly of the impression you're making and smile in your responses. You want to show your personality. You want to even crack a joke a little bit. You want to shine and show that you're a warm person that's going to be easy to work with, that's going to be fun to work with, that's going to be part of the team. And be strategic always in your answers. That's why practicing your answers to some of these questions is very important. But you do not want to sound rehearsed. You want to sound very natural. So after those initial general questions happen, whether it's during the first interview or a phone interview, when you're invited back for a second or third interview, that's typically when they get into the behavioral questions. And those are questions that typically start with, tell me about a time when. Give me an example of when. So this is when you have to have at least 3 stories in the back of your mind where you can talk about perhaps your leadership skills, your communication skills, your teamwork skills, your decision-making skills, your good listening skills. So have some scenarios in mind where you can talk about these things. And the STAR method is a good thing to keep in mind when you're answering these questions. It's a situation or a task that you're discussing, the action you took, and the result that occurred, the outcome, the accomplishment. And always keep in mind that you want to have a positive result at the end of these stories. So you never want to have a story that has a negative outcome, always positive. So some sample questions, which are good to think about ahead of time, are tell me about a time you worked with a team. Maybe they'll say, tell me about a time you worked with a team and no one agreed with how you wanted to handle things. What did you do? Give an example of when you had a challenge with communication with someone from a different background and how you overcame it. Have you had to pick up new skills quickly? And tell me how you adapted and how that worked. So this whole Zoom thing and virtual way of learning is a great way to answer that question. How you adapted to, how you were flexible, how you're resilient during this time. Talk about a time when you had to solve a problem and what was the result. Have you ever been in a situation where you were not sure what was going on and had to figure it out on your own? So they're looking for, in these behavioral questions, again, they're looking for teamwork, good communication skills, good listening skills, good analytical skills, good leadership skills. They're looking for flexibility, resilience. So in your stories that you have, you want to demonstrate all of those positives. Not everything in one story, of course, but you want to always have an outcome that showed a good result. So have those scenarios in the back of your mind. And again, you want to claim and demonstrate through the storytelling and practice your storytelling. Practice again with a friend, with a colleague, in front of the mirror. Show positive results always and outcomes. You never want to talk about the time you did a group project, for example, and you ended up getting a D or an F because no one could, get their act together and cooperate and collaborate. You want to always have a good outcome. And choose examples that are relevant, if you can, to the job you're applying to. How your skills translate to that job description. How your outcomes match what they're looking for in the qualifications of the job. And this is where you have a chance, again, to emphasize your skills and your talents and what you bring to the table. Your value and your uniqueness. So when you're answering those questions, always keep that in mind. What it is that you bring to the table as a candidate. Why you stand out. Why you shine. And I've been talking to many employers throughout various industries, and these are the skills, the core skills and the competencies that they're looking for. These are the important characteristics that they're looking for in their candidates and who they want to bring into their team. How you function as a team member. Your cooperation skills, your communication skills, your listening skills. Your effective interpersonal communication. Even composing an email is a very important part of communication. How you're addressing people in a professional manner. How you're writing, making sure you're not using abbreviations or informal language in your writing skills. They're looking for people that can learn new ideas quickly. They're looking for candidates who can identify, define, and solve problems. So problem-solving skills are critical. And you can demonstrate some of these things in the stories you tell, in the answers to your questions. And how you appreciate and interact with individuals that are different than yourselves. What kind of team projects have you worked on with international students or people that are different than you? Critical and analytical thinking is always important to employers. Creative and innovative thinking as well. And how you can research, how you can conduct research and locate important information. So research skills are extremely critical. And then competency within that exact field or industry, what you bring to the table there. And again, your writing skills, your speaking skills, It's very critical these days. So many students these days are just using text messaging and emails to get messages across, but you want to be an effective communicator in many ways. Your oral and your written communication skills are very important to companies. And then this whole time, like I said, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. So you're both looking for this list of things. The functional knowledge, the industry knowledge, how well you know this industry. That's why researching the competitors is very important before an interview as well. If it's a global company, what your knowledge is globally. And then personality and cultural fit are key. Do you want to work in a company where you have to dress up in a suit every day? Or do you prefer an office where they're wearing flip-flops and bringing their dogs to work? Do you want to work in a place that's young and growing in a startup? Or do you want to work in a company that's global and across the world and huge offices with lots of people? And then think about your commitment. Think about what kind of commitment you could make to this company. When they ask that question, where do you see yourself in 4, 5, 10 years? This is a good chance to demonstrate your commitment to the company and the industry. And that's what they want to see. Retention is really critical these days. They want to know that the training involved is going to be a lasting fit. And oftentimes an internship is a pipeline to a full-time job as well. So they want to see that that level of commitment is there. And always have some questions prepared to ask them. When they ask that question, do you have any questions for me? You never want to say, nope, all set, don't have any questions. Of course, they've answered a lot of your questions during the interview, during this conversation you're having, where they're saying something and you're responding to it, and it's a give and take, a back and forth. Of course, they've answered a lot of your questions then, but always have some key questions prepared that you can ask, because what it does is it shows your enthusiasm for the job. It shows your interest in the company, and that's what they're looking for in a candidate. Someone who's enthused, excited about the position, is going to be a long-time person with the company. Think of yourself as a consultant and prepare some questions ahead of time where you're really learning about this job in this company. Learn about the goals for the position in the department. And ask open-ended questions, never a yes or no answer. And this is not the time to talk about salary or benefits or anything like that. This is the time to talk about the company and how they're growing, how you can learn, what the prospects are for growing with that company. And in the closing, you always want to summarize your qualifications and your interests and how they relate to the job. A good question to always ask at the end is, can you tell me about the next steps in the interview process? When can I expect to hear back from you? Those are fine questions to ask. And make sure you have their contact information so you can reach back out to them with a thank you. It's very important to send that thank you note within 24 hours. Even if you've met with 4, 5 people, send individual thank you notes to everybody. And this allows you to express, once again, your interest in the position. And if there's something you forgot to say in that interview, something critical, this is where you can add that to that thank you note. This slide just reviews what I've said. It's part of marketing yourself, part of showing that you stand out as the qualified candidate. A lot of people ask the question, should thank you notes be mailed or emailed? I think nowadays an email is the way to go because it gets to them fast. Mailing something is a nice gesture, and not a lot of people do it, so it stands out a little bit. But I think a very professional email is the way to go these days. And again, you want to emphasize your qualifications and your interest in the specific aspects of the job. It's a good time to talk maybe a little bit about something personal that happened during your conversation in the interview. Maybe they told you they were going to the White Mountains to see the foliage this weekend. You can write something in the thank you note like, I hope you have a wonderful trip to the White Mountains. What it does is it shows that you were listening, it shows that you care, and it reminds them of who you are, you know, which candidate you are and what your conversation was all about. So it's a good reminder for them. Well, key selling points would vary from candidate to candidate, of course, and from job to job. And again, this is where you want to really study that job description, what they're looking for, what the qualifications are necessary for the job. And you want to take those qualifications and see which ones of those you bring to the table, whether it's a language skill or a software skill or an industry-specific skill that you maybe did during your internship experience. So those are the type of skills you want to bring to the table, those that relate directly to the job. A luncheon, when they ask you back for a luncheon, that's usually a very good sign. You're one of the candidates that they're really keeping their eye on to make an offer to. And what they're looking for in a luncheon is good manners. They're looking for how you interact with the wait staff. They're looking for how you can have a normal conversation, not just an industry-related conversation, but a normal, fun conversation at a table. How you can keep a conversation lively and going, and what you contribute to that conversation. I know there's one financial firm, I forget who it is, that would call the restaurant ahead of time and tell them to bring the wrong order, lunch order, to the candidate. And what they were doing was watching how that candidate reacted when they received the wrong lunch. Let's say you ordered a Caesar salad and you got a burger. What would you say? How would you handle that? And of course, you wouldn't just sit there and eat the burger, because that wouldn't look like you have good initiative or good communication skills or confidence. But how you handled saying that, I'm sorry, but I did order the Caesar salad, and you know what it's going to do is delay everybody else from eating their meals. So you might say, please go ahead and start eating. My meal is going to take a little time. I don't mind you start eating ahead of me, please. I'll have a roll while you're starting your luncheon. So they want to see good manners, good communication skills. How you treat the wait staff is typically what happens during a luncheon. Those retail and restaurant experiences always translate well on a resume. It's all about customer service, communication, listening, being able to show even results in a restaurant or a retail. Maybe you increase sales in the retail job because of your great interactions with customers. Maybe you did some follow-up to customers, sending a note of thank you for a large purchase or something. So think about the things, the outcomes in these jobs, and what it was that you brought to the table besides just, being a cashier or a retail person or a waiter. Your personality probably brought some really good results for those companies. And
Mhm.
how did you attain that? How did you do that? So those are some bullets you want to have in your resume, showcasing, you know, any increase in sales or increase or return customers because of your knowledge of retail, or your excitement about the restaurant and the daily specials, or whatever it was that you brought to the table. Try to demonstrate that when you're talking about your stories and your outcomes.
Mhm.
And see if you can do some volunteer work in a hospital.
Mhm.
That might be a good thing to or even volunteer work for any nonprofit.
Mhm.
That might be a good thing to highlight on your resume. As interviewing it's a scary process, but remember, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. They're trying to sell this job. They're trying to have you join the company. Yes, you do not want to come across that way. Even though sometimes everybody understands that's what's happening with recent grads, you want to always talk about growth opportunities, finding a mentor, becoming a mentor eventually. Um, so this is where you can ask about what type of growth opportunities are available within the company if you took this job, because what they see from that is that you're interested in growing with them. Even if you do decide to leave, you know, within a year or so, they don't need to know that in the interview because you don't even really know that yet. You may get there and realize, oh, this is the place I definitely want to learn and grow with for the next 5 years at least. So you always want to talk about that purpose of learning and growing and mentoring and staying with that company, or at least in that industry. It's a tricky question to answer because you don't want to lie, of course, or exaggerate anything, but you do want to demonstrate that you are somebody that's worth hiring because you're going to stay with them. It's cost a lot of money to replace employers. So you did get a job after your gap.
Yeah, after my gap.
Okay, that's important to see on a resume. If you had a gap when you're applying for a job and you haven't been working for 4 months, that's a little harder to talk about. But if you currently have a job and you overcame that gap on your resume, then it's typically not a problem. But be prepared to discuss, you know, what you did. Did you take any extra courses? Did you do some research work, volunteer work? So be prepared to discuss that if that comes up. But typically that would come up more if the gap is present, not in the past. And remember, the career office is here for you. We're available to look at your resume, help you show your accomplishments and write a good accomplishment statement for a retail or a restaurant job. We're here to do mock interviews with you. We have a lot of events coming up the rest of this semester, so please check the events page on Handshake. That's important to do as well. We have a lot of events that we're going to be bringing employers to virtual situations where you can meet them virtually, which is key. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date and that it matches and aligns with your resume. Make sure your Handshake profile is up to date. You want your Handshake, LinkedIn, and resume to all be aligned and professional and robust. And you can make your Handshake profile public, just as you do your LinkedIn profile, so that companies can find you. And more recruiters are using Handshake as a means to recruit candidates. So they are looking for candidates through Handshake, just as they do LinkedIn. You can follow companies on Handshake in the same way you do on LinkedIn, so you can get job alerts when they post new positions. So these are all important steps to take. So thank you all, and Have a great rest of your day, and remember that Handshake is available with lots of different resources. Our website, suffolk.edu/careers, has a ton of great resources for students as well. So please check those out.